Today we are taking up Philip Larkins. Philip Larkin, his time period is 1922 to 1985. He grew up in Coventry where his father served as city treasurer. He attended King Henry VIII School and went up to read English at St. John's College, Oxford in 1940. The austere, war-disrupted atmosphere of his undergraduate years in Oxford, during which he formed a lasting relationship of Kingsley, is evoked in his novel Jill, that was published in 1946. After graduating, Larkins went to the small town of Wellington, where he ran the local library, single-handed and untrained, and still found time to write both Jill and his second novel, set in a small town library, A Girl in Winter. A third novel, he began that and worked for that novel for nearly 5 years, but never completed. Temperamentally, Larkin seemed to have needed a full-time job, and without realizing he had already embarked on the career which was to last to the end of his life, and which took him subsequently to the university libraries of Leicester and Belfast and Hull. Hull was where he spent the second half of his life, and he wrote vividly about the place in his poem Here. But even after spending 30 years, he hesitated to call it his home. He never married, and he portrayed himself as a hermit-like bachelor, though it is said that he had several relationships with women. As a reviewer, he wrote perceptively about both poetry and jazz, often taking the side of the pleasure-seeking audience against the drabness and difficulty of modernism. Though his own work's relationship with modernism was a good deal more complex than he liked to pretend. In the autumn of 1984, a year before his death, he was offered the poet laureateship, but he turned it down. Throughout his career, he was regarded as a minor poet with a narrow range of subject matter. But now Larkin seems to dominate the history of English poetry, though detractors continue to speak of his gloom, his insularity and anti-modernism, the authority and grandiloquence of his long poems, and the grace, sharpness, or humor of his shorter ones now seem indisputable, as does his clear-eyed engagement with love, marriage, freedom, destiny, aging, death, and other far more marginal subjects. The appearance of his collected poems in 1988, while turning up no new masterpieces, added over 80 poems to the Larkin's canon, considerably enlarging our sense of a poet who had published only 4 slim volumes in his lifetime. For all the seriousness of his early ambitions as a novelist, Larkin's achievement and reputation were made as a poet. It can be said that it was not he himself that chose poetry, but that the poetry chose him. Yet there was a little maturity in his first volume, The North Ship, that was published in 1945, which, if anything, seems to go backward from the tough, witty, Odenesque verse he wrote as a schoolboy. Its frail, inward, Yeatsian rhetoric of hearts and silences and stony places has a consistency of tone he might have been pleased with for a time, but which he soon tried to toughen and correct. He was blocked and seemingly depressed through the late 1940s, the time where his father passed away. But in 1950, in the autumn of which he moved to Belfast, he wrote at Grass, Deceptions, Spring, Wants, No Road, and a number of other poems that were to appear in the Less Deceived, that was published in 1955. It was in this collection that Larkin constructed the poetic persona, plain speaking, skeptical, modest, unshowy, awkward, commonsensical, even rather dry and dull. That was to be associated not only with him, but with the movement and the post war generation of poets. It is a persona that owes something to modernist forebearers like Laforgue and Eliot, but also to the Englishness and to Orwell. There can be something faintly comic in Larkin's narrator's miserable exclusion from the joys of sex or the consolation of religion or the excitements of social rebellion, his life compromised or squatted on by the Todd work. But at best, Larkin makes matters of obsessive concerns to him whether to marry, how to face the idea of death, what we owe to others, especially to our parents, and ourselves, to what extent we control our lives, into rich dramatic monologues inviting the reader to listen in as he thinks aloud, venturing one tentative explanation, then overturning it with another, filling his speech with the hesitation and self correction that seems to guarantee the speaker's honesty. The Larkin persona is a subtle and elaborate construct, even a mask, though he was perhaps right to feel that his work was far more direct, emotional, and even naive that critics acknowledge. The effect of a man speaking to other men is even more pronounced in Larkin's two other mature collections, The Whitsun Wedding and High Windows, which in nearly all respects are a refinement of the manner and enlargement of the scope. The Less Deceived, not a departure of development as he did of free verse or poetry in translation. In these volumes, the close pact with the reader is enhanced by Larkin's use of the vernacular, the slangy familiarity, and obscenities, not only counterpointing and holding down more elevated diction, but also delivering some of his most famous lines. The mood of Larkin's poems is often sober, glimpsing the loneliness, emptiness, and morality that lie underneath social rituals. The ideas in his poems, boldly stated, can sound chilling and depressing. The sense we have of life lived according to love makes the makes the compromised, loveless reality almost unendurable, that human existence is only bearable because the prospect of death is worse. But his gloom is often overstated by critics. He rather relished the role of misanthrope, and there is something energetic and life enhancing about his determination to find phrase making, disabused summonation of everything from childhood. Even his darkest poems have their element of black comedy, and there are, besides, a number of exercises in light verse, whether satirical about social mores, sardonic about human relationships. The tone sometimes is affectionate rather than scabrous, and though Larkin has been accused of loftiness and condensation, as in his image of his cut prince crowns, urban yet simple, this is to ignore his imaginative enlargement with ordinary lives. The empathy he shows towards the young mothers in afternoon, pushed to the side of their own lives, or towards the patients and stretcher case in ambulances and the buildings. Larkinesque affirmation of another kind comes from the metaphors of air and light, the transcendent utopian gleams which appear throughout his work, highlighting the limitation of the real world, yet offering a vision of hope and integrity which is more than merely cruel. Never a prolific writer, Larkin published little after 1974, feeling that poetry had given him up, turning increasingly to drink because he became partially deaf, and deriving professional comfort only from the acclaim from his collected prose, required writing. Though his work repeatedly denies the possibility of life after death, Larkin survives through his art as an original, obsessive, deep feeling poet who courageously refused the consolations of the conventional belief. This is all for today. Thank you.